Welcome, my friend, to Next Level Change Success. I'm Therese, a change strategist and practitioner with over 20 years of experience designing and delivering impactful change programs across various industries. In this podcast, I share real-world practical strategies to help you create and deliver positive change experiences, whether you're a leader, practitioner, or someone looking to bring new ways of working to life. In today's fast-paced world, change is constant. Here we focus on how you can put people at the centre of your change strategy, because people with a sense of purpose are the most important link in driving performance. So if you're ready to create meaningful change and achieve all the success that comes with it, keep listening. Together, let's change the conversation and take it to the next level. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Next Level Change Success. My name is Therese, and I'm the founder of myvirtualchangemanager.com. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm recording on Tharawal country and pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians on the land on which I am recording, and to elders both past, present, and emerging. So today we're going to be talking about the concept of doing more with less, and this is a real thing in organisations at the moment with the economic pressures that are coming to bear and different tariffs, dare I say it, supply chain impacts. And what we're finding, of course, is that the belts need to be tightened, as they say, when it comes to cost bases, and therefore there are ways in which organisations are looking to innovate, so through AI and get efficiency through AI, etc., if their tech platforms and tech landscape is ready for that. And then, of course, within the project and change context, there is this concept of the change is not going to stop, and if anything, it's going to accelerate. And yet there's pressure on resources, and you're finding perhaps that you can't recruit or that you can't invest like you would like to even deliver projects or programs. And yet the expectation is that more people in the business as usual context will be delivering change, perhaps not with the right skill sets. So let's talk about some really fundamental approaches that you can take during these times if you are looking to introduce a lot of change and perhaps are struggling with trying to get backing when it comes to funding to bring people into the organisation to support that. And I always like to think about how during these times you can challenge yourself to have a different mindset around it. Some people will feel confined through the concept of scarcity and think, I am constrained here. My hands are tied. I can't do anything. They're just expecting me to do more. And the first lever really in efficiency when it comes to these times, and the first thing I always go to is, well, how can we do things differently in our delivery of change so that it is more efficient? One of the byproducts, I think, of good times and where there aren't any pressures on either the business nor cost base is that people tend to become, dare I say it, lazy in the way that they're looking at doing things because they're not forced to innovate. They're not forced to look to do things a different way. And that might be yourself. It might be that you for the last couple of years, you've been happily doing change, delivering projects the same way time after time because it's worked. And you haven't had to really bid or really put up any business case for the resource support you've had. It's just been supported, signed off, but you might have had a change in that psychology at the senior levels, and therefore it's harder. And you might be struggling to look at things in a different way. So the first thing, and I'm glad that you're listening to this podcast and this episode in particular, first thing I will say is you do need to explore AI, and you need to look at how communication can get developed in ChatGPT type model, Canva. Like, there are some great applications out there, and if you haven't looked to explore those to date, you should, because it gives you opportunity. And it means that you don't necessarily need to, within your organisation's guardrails. Some organisations are locking down, saying you can't use those tools to their own detriment. I think part of it is that that concern, and quite a valid one, regarding confidential information going into a ChatGPT model. But one of the key things when it comes to change is that you can keep it very generic, you can keep it nondescript, so therefore your commercial in confidence is still retained, and you're just really using ChatGPT, and you can use it very well and create almost a bot in ChatGPT which can help you create comms. Because communications and the creation of it takes a lot of time. To craft a good message, it takes time and energy and investment. And you're going to find that in a constrained environment where you need to do more with less, you really want to explore that function where you might give the details, as I said, in a generic way of the change, and get the ChatGPT tool to review those comms and finesse them for you so that they're more effective, that they're simple and easily understood. So AI there, Canva, great creation tool visually because a picture's worth 1,000 words, and in fact video is even more powerful. So doing more with less is how you can use some of those tools. I would say definitely explore those for efficiencies. The other thing regarding efficiency is, where have you got people who have skills that you may not be aware of, that they haven't really brought to the table because it's not in their core job requirement, but they're enthusiastic, they want to be developed, they want to be invested in, and they want to be given opportunities to work on pieces of work that traditionally you might have handed only to project and change specialists. And how can you, rather than looking to bring in a resource for the 12-month time frame that you need this delivered, is look at how you might develop and invest in someone who has all of the right, I guess, personality traits or signals around being diligent, have empathy, have good writing skills, for example, naturally can put themselves in the shoes of other people and look to broaden their skill set to incorporate change so that then they can work on the project or program, and over time they might want to step into a change role. So see it as a development pathway. And if you've been lucky enough that in your organisation that performance conversations and development conversations are a regular thing, you can put the shout out around, is there someone in other people's teams who has shown an interest in the change space, so your need can meet their want and actually be able to create something and a great opportunity together for an individual who might want to step into that realm and be developed in it and gain experience in it. So during these times, there can be absolute opportunities for people in your organisation. The other thing in relation to this landscape of doing more with less is that concept of prioritization. And if you're not actively prioritizing, whether you're a change person in a project and you've been given multiple streams of work to do, and if you haven't yet built that muscle which helps you prioritize based on urgency, based on the need, based on the priority of your leader or the priority of the project or program, and be able to effectively prioritize your work, then I suggest you really explore prioritization frameworks. And the simplest framework I found was in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it's one that I used a lot. In fact, there are 2 dimensions that I use when looking at priorities. One is part of the critical path concept within projects. And so let's talk about dependencies and critical pathing just for a second, because it really is important. I use it very much in prioritization because I need to know what pieces of work I'm taking off that conveyor belt, working on, and then putting back on that conveyor belt of projects at the right time to have that keep progressing. If I pick up the wrong piece of work and get somehow mired or lost in that rabbit hole, and then don't quickly get that piece of work back on that conveyor belt, someone else may be delayed, or we're missing out on ensuring that we're giving people enough notice about this change. So you need to, as a change person of interest in change, you want to make sure that you're prioritizing effectively. And if you explore the concept of critical path and dependencies, then you can give voice to that to others. So basically say, I'm not going to start that until I can get that piece of work from you. For example, I need to know who is actually impacted by this. So if we're not clear on that, I'll draft up some communication and then we'll sit and walk through it so that all of the questions and answers that I need, I can get that from you. And so it's not always a blind hold, like I'm not working on that piece of work until you get that to me. But I also then know the time critical pieces that I need to work on. And they're the things I'm going to keep moving, because guess what? I've got a deadline and I need to move this through. I think part of that is from my marketing days of having a campaign and knowing that the agency can't do their piece of work until I get the feedback back to them, if that makes sense. So critical pathing was something that I think really came from my marketing background of how to deal with suppliers and make sure that you're delivering pieces to them that they need so that they're not stalling and costing you more money. So think about it in that way around what is critical. That is one way to prioritize from a time perspective, time and cost perspective. The other thing really in Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I think is just a great book. Fundamentally, it has stood the test of time. Definitely something that I go back to. There's a lot of great concepts there that really do set themselves up well when it comes to change. But there's a simple prioritization matrix in there, the high urgency, high criticality piece, and how pieces of work can cycle through that quadrant, the 4 quadrants. And I would recommend that you explore that as well if you struggle with prioritization, because it starts to fundamentally give you the concepts of the considerations you need to think about when prioritizing. And prioritizing isn't a static thing, it's a constant thing. And even throughout my work day, I am such a list person of things I need to do. I create a list the night before the next day. So at the end of the day, I'm creating my list for the next day. That means that I've already started to get a priority matrix happening. If something happens in the morning, I can swap things out. 3 times a day. In some organizations, 3 times a day, I will revisit my list, rewrite my list, reprioritize my list, dependent upon the flow of the organization. And it gives you a bit of sense of control, which is really important. But it also does mean that you're flexible by knowing that prioritization is a thing that can change throughout the day if you end up having a big emergency that you need to deal with in your change space. Something that may not have gone well that you need to jump onto, respond to, communicate, craft those communications in a fast way, have them sound good, get them circulating for sign-off and approval so that you can get those issued. So always juggling those priorities. Doing more with less means that you need to be really good at prioritization and reprioritization, whether it be for yourself, but also for your people. The other thing to do more with less is you need to communicate better. So if you're finding that you have a smaller team, it doesn't mean that you communicate less. In fact, you really want to be communicating more, but in an effective way. So not wasting time. I'm not going to waste time in meetings where there isn't progress. I'm not going to waste time in planning every single day with my team. I'm going to set the agenda for the quarter, and then we're going to work through in a Kanban style or an efficient style our communication in a touch-based way so that we're agile, so that we can get updates as soon as possible, connect the dots, make sure everyone's clear on the impacts on their work if priorities have changed, and then we can keep moving forward. So communication, the stronger your communication muscle, the better when you have to do more with less. And then when you come to the more with less when this resource constraint, because it seems like an immovable object when it comes to a lack of resources. But what I will challenge is that it's not about the resourcing, it's about the right people on the piece of work. And one of the key things when I talk about right people is that you can absolutely do more with less when you have the right people around the table. If you don't have the right people, and sometimes this can happen where people will just throw a name out there or a person. Oh, this person has some capacity. Yeah, that person has capacity because they're not invested in the organisation. They really don't want to be there. You're going to offload them onto me to work with my team because they're unhappy where they are, and you think you're helping them by putting them on this piece of work, but they're going to be more of a hindrance than a help. So you really do need to have a look in the landscape around the right people who have a really strong team-oriented ethic. So can work outside their role remit, happy to be hands-on, happy to help out, want to be part of the team, understand the objective. You will always have people who will achieve more, who are invested. So don't just throw a person or anyone at a role because you think that's important. That's the same thing as when I started the conversation regarding people who want development opportunities, is that they also have to display those right characteristics around strong team ethic, happy to colour outside the lines, happy to dig in where need be, to be given that opportunity versus, and I certainly have experienced this and sent people back to areas of businesses with the feedback that they really were not helpful. I decided to not ask them to do things because whilst they said they really wanted to get exposure in this area, my experience was that they want to get exposure, but only in these things and only under these terms, which is not what you need when it comes to projects, when you have to do more with less. So every single person needs to be valued. They need to be engaged. They need to be, when I say valued, it's like they need that recognition to understand that they're important so that also you're retaining them, but they also need to grow. So sometimes you tend to pick up people who are just at the end of their journey with an organisation. Unfortunately, sometimes no matter what you do, you can't retain them, which is a little bit disappointing. But for the person, and sometimes they almost regret leaving when they've been given such a good opportunity to work with certain people. But because they're too far gone and they've already sought other interests or explored other opportunities, they voyage into the wild blue yonder. And of course, that's a bit disappointing. But what you're really looking for is someone who has the really great characteristics who you can develop into a great team member over time and who's a great cultural fit. That's what that culture fit is often talked about and why. So you also want to bring creativity to the table. How do I do more with less? And I think this is where some people very much struggle because they don't think outside of the box during times of high pressure. And in fact, they don't deal well with pressure. And it's definitely something I've observed with people who sometimes get put under pressure and they just can't seem to get themselves thinking properly or cohesively. They don't have a plan. They haven't had a plan, and then when the screws get tightened around costs, then they don't know where to go because their only avenue that they've ever explored during times when the sun's been shining is to ask for resource, and they've always gotten it or they've always had the support. Well, when that's not there, what do? They start to struggle because they can't think out of the box and they can't think creatively. And what I mean by thinking creatively is look at other industries, the way they're doing things. Think about and listen to your team who often have a lot of suggestions about how to improve things that leaders dismiss. And I don't care who you are, where you work, and I know because I'll put my hand up around not listening to my team at times and then having this aha moment of, yes, they've been trying to tell me this for 6 months and I haven't listened to them. So it's very much about enable your team. That's a creative function in and of itself. You don't need to have the solutions if you're sitting in a leadership role. You simply need to empower and listen to the voices of your people and invite their ideas and allow those ideas to come to the surface, be assessed around effectiveness and not by you, because if you haven't let the voices be heard to date, then you're probably not going to be able to assess the ideas well, and you are going to struggle to not be biased. So what I would do is definitely be looking at getting ideas, having some peer review, peer discussion on it, see what might actually come to the fore, and then see how you can, at low cost or at a zero cost, implement some of those ideas. And let me just give you one idea if you haven't already, because this works really well. I've done this with teams in the past and they've run with it and they've really responded well to it when we've been extremely busy, is carve out a couple of hours once a month, once every 3 weeks, which is simply a creative session where someone can explore a concept, can explore a way of working in another industry or whatever that may be, and they bring it to the table. They pose a question, a hypothetical question around it. So it might be like, how can AI help our everyday job? And then everyone goes and does some research, and then once a month you might have a 2 or 3 hour session, or 2 hours, 2.5 hours, which I can say is no time at all. In organizations where people absolutely for maybe 3-4 hours a day are effective, optimally effective. The rest of the time, if it's spent in meetings or if it's spent, I don't know how, but it's not as effective as those 3.5-4 hours, then I'm thinking that you can spare 2.5 hours every month to talk about a topic, explore, do some research, people share their thoughts, facilitate some great debate about a topic, which gets people thinking differently. So that's a way in which, when you're thinking about, well, I need to do, that's not helping me, Therese, do more with less. Well, it actually is, because your people, as they're having conversations around the table with people about a topic that may not even be work related. It might be about meditation and the power of meditation in everyday life. And it might be, well, maybe we should be starting each day with a 2-minute meditation as a team, just to see how we go integrating that as a concept. It will yield outcomes and more productivity from your people because they're thinking differently. They're exploring things differently. So have a think about that once a month you can dedicate some time to that. It's a great engagement for existing team members. It gets them out of their work head as well. And it can have them also share aspects and knowledge that they have that maybe you're not even aware of, and be able to bring that to the table as well. So that's just another concept. You have to think creatively. And that also means for yourself around how are you activating the creative side of your brain on a regular basis so that you can open your mind to how you can get creative with your resourcing, get creative and innovate with your approach to the work that you're doing, and how you can also upskill around change and how you can introduce change in a better way in the organization. It's definitely a time where, when I talk about the change ecosystem, which I will link in the show notes today, about the change ecosystem and what that means, is that the change ecosystem, if it's inefficient now, it's going to get worse when times are constrained. But sometimes it takes no cost whatsoever, just good decision making, more effective structures to be put into place so that you can manage the change that is not going to stop during these times and to get better outcomes from it. So that's something else to consider, is doing that survey on your change ecosystem, that assessment, and think about how things can improve to help enable the business to change faster if that's required and in an effective way. So I hope that's given you some ideas on a way to approach change in a more effective way when you're being asked to do more with less, and that it can give you time to reflect on areas where you might need to review who's doing what, explore the talents that exist in your team or in your organization as well, and opportunities there. Consider the smaller investment in people's upskilling and skill sets, and also consider the concept of creativity and how you can bring that in so that you can open up your mind to those opportunities that you may not be seeing currently. So critical. Hope you've enjoyed the episode. Come to myvirtualchangemanager.com, sign up to our newsletter, stay in touch. We've got some courses happening. I hope you have a wonderful day. Just remember that change matters because your people matter.